Hey, hi, how are you? My name is Felt. Welcome back to Final Fantasy XIV. Today we're talking about Dark Knight. Dark Knight, the resident edgy tank, the currently highest DPS tank, the least survivable tank. Whatever you want to call it, it is the great sword wielding menace on the battlefield. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about its defensives, its offensives, its opener and rotation, and why I really am not the biggest fan of it right now. Let's get started. Alright, so let's just start by talking about its defenses. Dark Knight's defensive capabilities are actually pretty good, as long as you're not talking about self-sustain. Dark Knight has tons of options for self-mitigation. You have a great tool in Dark Mind for dealing with magic damage. You have your classic Shadow Wall, the same 2-minute cooldown that everyone else has. You have Rampart like every tank has, same with Reprisal. You also now have Oblation, which is just a short duration, short cooldown ability for just 10% mitigation for yourself or a party member, which can be very useful if you're off-tanking. And then we have the cream of the crop, the Blackest Night, or TBN as everyone calls it. By far Dark Knight's strongest defensive capability right now, and in my opinion, probably the reason why it doesn't have a great regen capability right now, because TBN is obscenely powerful. So you push the button, it consumes 3,000 mana, and it'll give you a HP shield for 25% of your health. So I push the button, I now have that HP shield that is 25% of my health for 7 seconds. And if it breaks, you will get a proc, which shows up here on your UI, that will let you cast an Edge of Shadow or a Flood of Shadow for free. Meaning that the 3000 MP you spent to use a defensive cooldown isn't a DPS loss as long as it breaks the shield. Which is strange, because you want the shield to eat damage, however you want it to eat enough so that it breaks. So if you're overpowering content and overgearing for content, then your shield might not break on auto attacks from a boss or a tank buster from a boss if you have enough mitigation and healing from your allies. It's an incredibly powerful tool when you're progression rating or learning fights and progging through them, because it will almost essentially always break because you'll not be outgearing them. However, as you learn fights better, as you go further through them, you become less and less useful for TBN other than just you throw it onto a main tank when they're eating a tank buster that might just straight up kill them or puts them down to 1 HP. It's a very, very powerful, versatile, useful tool, because you can even throw it on other party members when they're targeted by mechanics. A great example is last tier's raids, Eden. On E11 Savage, there was a mechanic that would target a healer and apply a massive chunk of damage to them. So you could throw your TBN on said healer to make great use of your defensive capabilities and get the shield to break and be able to use it for DPS as well. It's a really powerful tool, however, I believe it doesn't even come close to comparing to tools like Holy Sheltron, Bloodwedding, or Heart of Corundum. I think that those got such a powerful buff from Shadowbringers, sorry, not in Shadowbringers, I mean from Shadowbringers, that the Blackest Night has kind of been left in their dust. It doesn't change that Dark Knight has powerful defensive capabilities, Oblation is really good, Dark Mind is great if you know that the boss is using magic attacks, because it's such a short cooldown. So if you know the boss is hitting with magical auto attacks, then Dark Mind is really powerful. But outside of that, Dark Knight can struggle a bit in the defensive department because they have less self-sustain than the other tanks. But that's enough talking about their defensives, let's go talk about their offensives and where they're kind of shining recently. Alright, so Dark Knight's offensives, or damaging abilities. You have a lot of them. Let's start by talking about the MP costing abilities. Edge of Shadow, Flood of Shadow. They are buttons that you press, they deal damage, and they grant you your Dark Side buff, which is a 10% damage buff. Do not ever let that fall off. You also have your gauge spending abilities, such as Blood Spiller, Quietus, and Living Shadow. They cost 50 blood gauge, which is something you build by either hitting Soul Eater at the end of your 1-2-3, hitting Stalwart Soul in the second hit of your AoE combo, or by using Blood Weapon to gain gauge. Let's do a quick introduction to Blood Weapon. As you hit skills, you will regen MP, and you will increase your blood gauge by 10. It is a very important thing for you to use, and very important for you to learn how to fit as many GCDs as you can inside of it. Most Dark Knights like to run a skill speed of 244 or lower, because that makes it easier to hit all of the GCDs you need to inside of Blood Weapon, because it is a timer, not a charge system, unlike its counterpart, Delirium, which is a button that you push, and it gives you 3 stacks of Delirium, which lets you cast either Blood Spiller or Quietus without spending blood gauge. Very similar to Inner Release from Warrior, it's just for a different button this time. As for other damaging buttons we have on Dark Knight, we have Plunge, which is a dash forwards. We have Shadowbringer now, which is just a 600 potency attack that goes off in a straight line. It can do damage as an AoE, similar to Flood of Shadow. It's very powerful. You have Salted Earth, which is just a cooldown button on a 90-second thing. Drop a field at your feet. It will deal damage over time. We got a new addition to it, which is you push the button again, and it does a burst of damage. You have Plunge, which is just your leap. You have Carve and Spit, which is just a button that does damage and restores MP. It now shares a recast timer with Abyssal Drain. So in AoE situations when there are 4 enemies or more, you will cast Abyssal Drain. And I do mean 4. Abyssal Drain does not do that much damage. It only does 150 potency. You need at least 4 enemies to be there for it to do more damage than a Carve and Spit. There's also Living Shadow, which is a just entirely crazy button. It summons a version of yourself to fight alongside you. It's a glorified dot, but it's a very powerful dot that can work in AoE as well as single target. Something that you will be wanting to pop really, really early on inside of party buffs, because it will not snapshot party buffs, it will gain them in real time as if it was a pet. So it's something that you want to be pushing ASAP when it comes up. There's a reason why you push it on the 3rd cooldown, right, 3rd GCD inside your opener, because it just gets it out as early as possible so it can do damage underneath party buffs. That, as far as I know, should be all your damage skills. Outside of your basic 1, 2, 3, but it's very simple. Damage MP regen, health regen, as well as giving you blood gauge. Very straightforward stuff. Let's talk about the opener and rotation, how it all works, and why I think Dark Knight's kind of awkward right now. So let's talk about the opener and rotation and how Dark Knight feels to play. So, if you're fighting on Dark Knight and you're going to main tank, you start by turning on Grid, obviously. During your countdown before hitting the boss, you will hit the Blackest Night 2 seconds pre-pull if you think the shield will break by the opening autos or an opening AoE. If you don't think it'll break, do not cast it, you will otherwise miss out on an Edge of Shadow cast. At minus 0.6 seconds before you hit the enemy, you will be casting Blood Weapon. The bottom line is you want to cast it directly before you hit the enemy with Hard Slash, so that you are getting as many GCDs as you can under Blood Weapon. Then your rotation will then go as such. It will be Hard Slash, you will double weave Edge of Shadow Delirium, you will hit Siphon Strike, and if you are potting, you will use your potion here. If you are not, this will be an open GCD. You will then hit Soul Eater, and here comes all the craziest double weaves of your life. After Soul Eater, you use Living Shadow, and then Salted Earth. Then you will use Hard Slash, and then you will double weave Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow. Then Blood Spiller, Carve and Spit Plunge, Blood Spiller, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, Salted Earth's second button, Salt and Darkness, and Edge of Shadow again. Then you will hit Siphon Strike, and then use your second plunge, and then your final Edge of Shadow, hit Soul Eater, and then just go through your rotation. And your rotation works on a semi-need basis. You want to be sitting around 6,000 MP because... Sorry, you don't want to be sitting around 6,000 MP. You want to be casting Edge of Shadow around 6,000 MP because that way you can be holding enough to use the Blackest Night off cooldown. However, if you're worried about Darkside falling off, you have other defensive cooldowns other than TBN. Use Edge of Shadow so you don't lose Darkside instead of potentially losing your 10% damage buff for a massive portion of the fight. You will also cast Blood Spiller more or less off cooldown, because you don't want to build too much gauge on it, because at the 60-second window you will be reusing Blood Weapon, and if you're not careful you will overcap your blood gauge, and making 10 gauge or 20 gauge go to waste depending on how you did things. At the 60-second window you will be using Blood Weapon and Delirium again. However, as of right now, we are not using Shadowbringer at our 60-second window. You are holding it for the second 2-minute window, because 1200 potency under party buffs is much more than 600 potency under no party buffs and 600 potency under party buffs. Even if they drift the tiniest bit, I personally think that making sure that both your Shadowbringers land under party buffs is just much, much better than any other way you could be using the skill right now. It's just a lot of burst damage that you should be hitting during party buffs. Now, that does lead to Salted Earth coming out of sync with the rest of your kit. Salted Earth is on a 90-second cooldown, and it is just a button you should be hitting when it comes up. Same for Salt and Darkness. If Salted Earth is down and the boss is standing in it, hit Salt and Darkness, plain and simple. It is a button that should be pushed off of cooldown for DPS because it is so desynced from the rest of your kit. It'll become resynced at the 3-minute burst windows and the 6-minute burst windows, but outside of that, it kind of does its own thing, drifting along. Make sure it doesn't actually drift, and make sure you're hitting it off cooldown. And the 2-minute reopener window is essentially the same as your opener. You will probably be hitting a Blood Spiller before you hit Blood Weapon, and then you will essentially do the same thing of hit Blood Weapon, Hard Slash, the Double Weave, Edge, and Delirium, hit Siphon, and probably not have anything else to hit, and then Soul Eater into Living Shadow, Hard Slash, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, Carve and Spit, probably a Plunge, Blood Spiller, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, probably another Edge of Shadow, and then back into your rotation as per normal. Making sure that you're hitting as many Edge of Shadows inside of your buffs as you possibly can, inside of your party buffs. Your buffs aren't really buffs, but they kind of are. Just try and make sure you're going with the rest of the party. Because of the way that Dark Knight works, your self-damage buff is up all the time in place of someone like Gunbreaker or Warrior, where you have a button that you push that makes you do more damage. It's more of the idea of you are doing your damage, you have your self buff up all the time, and you will burst really hard when the party does. That will be it for this video. If you'd like to leave a like and a comment, following this will be a demonstration of how the rotation works. If you think I did it wrong, leave a comment and we can discuss how I can do it better. I don't think Dark Knight's in a great spot right now. I think Dark Knight needs a lot of help, but I think it needs more than what a 0.05 patch could have offered it in the first place. Either way, thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out, and I hope to catch you in the next one.